2015, a friend that I went to college with won a visa lottery and immigrated to the United States. That gave me the motivation to start applying for lottery visa to immigrate to the United States with my wife. My wife and I, both in our mid-20s, had dreamed of a better opportunity in the United States. Why I was hopeful that I may get lucky, my wife told me that I was wasting my time. She would remind me that there's a very slim chance that I would be accepted into the program. She was right, but I persisted. I persisted because I saw no future in my country. Even though we were both college graduates, we couldn't find a job, so I borrowed some money to start a shop. My wife and I became shopkeepers, barely making enough to pay the rent of the shop. Then one day, I received a letter in the mail, and our life were about to change with a single stroke of luck, the lottery visa. When the letter finally arrived, announcing that we were among the fortunate winners, our hearts swelled with excitement and anticipation. I will admit, I had an idealistic view of the United States. I thought all my suffering is over, and my wife and I was about to ride into the sunset and live the American dream. The only problem was that we needed someone we knew in the United States to sponsor us. The only people we knew were my former classmate, who now lives in Georgia, and a former childhood neighbor who we didn't know very well. My former classmate would not qualify because he recently immigrated. So my childhood neighbor was kind enough to allow us to share the 2-bedroom apartment he shared with his family in New York. Upon arriving in the United States, reality struck us like a hurricane. The American dream we had envisioned seemed distant and hazy. The childhood neighbor that was supposed to sponsor us threw us out after 2 months, not enough time for us to get on our feet. My wife and I had to find a job really fast and a place to stay because the neighbor's apartment wasn't enough for his own family. So I understood why he wanted us out. I had nothing but gratitude despite the circumstance in which we left his apartment. I loved the United States because there were so many places to work, even though the wages were not enough for our standard of living. So we were caught in the rat race. We could only get ahead if we work overtime, so we were constantly working. To make matters worse, my wife became pregnant at that time, so she started working part-time, and I was working 2 jobs. Back then, I was working 20 hours a day. Eventually, I bought a motorcycle, so my wife and I didn't have to ride the bus, and we could travel to places faster. Then she gave birth and became a stay-at-home mom. I am used to the long hours by now. My wife would take care of our daughter and house chores and cook while I brought home the bacon. Despite the rough start, we settled in 13 months. We had our apartment and a motorcycle for me and a car for my wife. I was working as a machine operator for a local mail shop. Life was good, but I felt like it could be better. I knew it was a matter of time before I burn out, and in order to move up the socio-economic ladder, we need a post-secondary education. My wife and I already had bachelor's degrees in our country, but it's useless in the States unless we get an MBA, which is a 2-year degree. My wife and I talked about it. Our plan was that she would attend school while I work. When she graduated and found a job, we would switch roles and I would earn my degree. Sounds like a plan, right? Wrong. During the period when my wife started going to school for her MBA, I was in constant contact with my college friend in Georgia. He became a real estate agent and was doing very well, flipping houses. He encouraged me to move down there because the cost of living was reasonable and there were more opportunities. I procrastinated, became too comfortable, which was the biggest mistake we made in staying in New York. I was making more money than I had ever made in my life, and I even had enough to support our families back home. My wife is ambitious and an intelligent woman. She understood that getting an MBA would open doors to a brighter future, so I thought we were on the same page. She attended classes during the evening when I returned home to watch the baby. We also had a neighbor that had little kids that we babysit for, and they do the same for us. I worked long hours to provide for my family. Our struggles were abundant, but the love we shared and the dreams we nurtured kept us going. 3 years later, my wife put in the work and graduated with her MBA. She soon found a high-paying job at a logistic company. The future was going great. Everything was going as planned. We were filled with hope that our daughter would grow up in a world where dreams come true, where hard work pays. What could go wrong? Well, My wife had a different idea. The first 4 months of her new job was one of the happiest in our lives. I quit my job to be a stay-at-home dad and to complete my MBA program quickly. Everything was going as planned. She had to work for 9 hours a day. The rest of the time we spent together as family. Then she brought up the idea of having another baby. I wanted to wait till I finished school, but she insisted because she wasn't getting any younger. I agreed, and we started trying. Then 2 months later, it was like a light switched off in her head. She started working long hours to hang out with coworkers and newfound friends. She got too carried away with the American lifestyle. She now had a high-flying career and forgot where she came from. She would come home at 8 p.m., forgetting that she had a family at home, and she would get defensive when I questioned her. She forgot who put this whole thing together. Instead of my wife appreciating all the moves that I made, she became this selfish and shallow person. I had to put this family first from my home country till now, and felt like this little chance she gets, she couldn't restrain herself. She became engulfed in the American way of life, arguing and disrespecting me like the American women you see on TV. Since my wife was now making more money than me, she's staying late at work. Most of the time, she hung out with friends and co-workers. I was either studying while babysitting or going to school while someone took care of our baby, most likely our neighbor. I was also actively looking for a side hustle to have some pocket money so I wouldn't ask my wife for money. I was doing the household chores, cooking, and taking care of the baby, and all my wife had to do was work. When she comes home, she's always in a bad mood to make her happy, even suggesting a massage sometimes, but she always speaks on something that I did. I felt like my efforts wasn't enough, and I was constantly walking on eggshells around her. The more success she becomes, the worse our marriage gets. During our arguments, she would often stoop to the lowest common denominator, belittling me for not having a job or a college degree in America. I couldn't believe it. She would say anything to hurt my feelings for some reason. She wasn't the same person that I married. Something had changed in her. Her insults pierced through my heart, leaving scars that would take time to heal. The harmony that we once had when we were suffering, we smiled together and cherished every moment. Now that we could see the light at the end of the tunnel, I was now lost in a sea of resentment and disappointment. Desperate to contribute financially and escape the constant verbal attack, I decided to explore alternative ways to make money. Secretly, I started working as a food delivery driver. When our neighbor is available to babysit our daughter, I would turn on the Uber Eats app and deliver food for people on my motorcycle. I have done well delivering food around the city in my spare time. It gave me some extra income for pocket money and minor stuff around the house, and some perishable items for our baby. She didn't even care to ask me where I got the money. After the first 4 months of starting her job, she stopped asking me whether I needed money. It became a fight for her to pay for the baby's diaper or food. Where did she expect me to get the money? When she was in my position and I was making a lot less, I paid for everything, even her school materials and things the college loans doesn't cover. I paid for everything my daughter needed. That was why I started delivering food, to make some extra income. Several times I had to sit her down to remind her about our plan and commitment, but it ended up being a shouting match. I couldn't work full-time as before and go to school at the same time because of scheduling conflict, and I wanted to finish school as soon as possible, which is why the food delivery gig was convenient. We turned from a happy couple to arguing over silly things. As days turned to months, we grew distance, and she would stay at work till 8 p.m., hanging out with friends and co-workers. I stopped asking about her whereabouts because I was tired of fighting, and I thought she had already given up on me and my daughter. Sometimes during an argument, she would threaten to call the cops on me, to throw me out of the apartment because I no longer pay rent. All through her insults, I never laid hands on her, ever. She always belittles what I do for our child, saying that she didn't need me around and she could take the baby to daycare because she can now afford it. She would threaten to call the police, even though I have never laid hands on her. With her constant threats and the things she was saying, it was obvious that her American friends are feeding her lines. I didn't understand any of that back then. I was clueless, wondering what was happening to my wife. One fateful evening, like most other days since I started delivering food, It was around 5:30 p.m. I decided to make some food runs before my wife came back home for the day. I arrived at an apartment to deliver food. As I knocked on the door of the customer's house, hoping to put my normal charm so I can get some tips, I stood on the doorstep with the food. I rang the doorbell. The door swung open, and a chill ran down my spine, revealing my wife standing there, clad in nothing but a white towel, like she just came off the shower. Shock and disbelief coursed through my veins as I struggled to comprehend the sight before me. She stood there, speechless, confused. I was about to ask her what she was doing there and whose apartment it was, as she immediately slammed the door on my face in fear. The food was on my hand, so I threw it away. Then I kicked the door in to come after her. The door swung open towards the inside of the house and hit her in the face, causing her to fall on the floor. The towel that she loosely wrapped around herself revealed that she was wearing nothing underneath it. The impact of the door hitting her face caused some hematoma that immediately looked like the size of a golf ball on her forehead. She screamed for the owner of the house, who was her affair partner. The owner of the apartment immediately came out looking confused. He was also wearing shorts with no shirt. My wife immediately got up with fear in her eyes. She ran behind him, afraid of what I was about to do to her. The man tried to push me out of his apartment, and I tried to explain to him that she was my wife and we have a baby together. He ignored what I was telling him and continued to push me, so we started fighting. Now, here I am, fighting with an almost naked man, while my wife, that barely had anything on, was screaming at the top of her lungs. I must have caused quite a commotion because someone called the police. I was put on handcuffs and led to the back of the police car to cool off. Then it started to dawn on me my life was over and I would be deported to my home country. The police put me behind the patrol car, then went over to my wife and her lover, who were visibly shaken, to take a statement. After my wife left the scene, one of the policemen came to me to get my side of the story. I was crying while explaining to the police all I had been through. To my surprise, the policeman showed some compassion to me. He asked me if I had a place to stay or have any close friends or family members. I mentioned my sponsor, and he advised me to go there instead of returning back home because the fastest way to get charged with assault and be deported is returning back to my wife and daughter in my current emotional state. He was very frank and honest with me. He told me that he has seen it thousands of times, and from what my wife told him, she seemed like she didn't love me anymore and wanted to press charges. How could she hate me so much? Where did I go wrong? He told me that the best thing for me to do was to hire a lawyer and have no contact with my wife. He gave me the address of a shelter in case I need it, and he pulled me out of the patrol car, removed the handcuff, and drove off. As the police drove away, I couldn't stop touching the marks the handcuff left on my wrist. It was a reminder of how I almost lost everything for the love of a woman. The moment was profound in the sense that I understood that the only person that cared if I lived or died was the police officer that just drove away. It reminded me of how lonely I was in this country. With a heavy heart, I called my friend in Georgia. He lives alone in his apartment, and he told me to take a bus from New York and move to Georgia to stay with him. I reminded him that I have a daughter. He was the second person that told me that in my condition, if I stayed, my daughter might lose both parents. He was right in that shocking moment, as the truth stared me in the face that my wife wanted to destroy my life. Anger and heartbreak battled for dominance within me. The weight of betrayal crushed my spirit, leaving me with profound sense of loss. Against the police recommendation, I wanted to return home and pack my belongings and disappear. I could no longer bear to stay in the same house with my wife. The harsh reality of my circumstances forced me to confront the limitation of my options. When I got home, she had already brought my daughter back from the neighbor's house. She was ready for war with me as she placed an ice pack directly on her forehead. As soon as I walked in, she started accusing me of abandoning our daughter, even though it was normal for us to leave our daughter with the neighbor. I knew what she was doing. She was trying to provoke me. I must not play her games. In hindsight, she didn't know what she was doing. I went grey rock and acted like she was a fly on the wall, which infuriated her. When I got to the house, I went straight to the bedroom to pack my belongings. As she peeks through the door crack every once in a while to see what I was doing, It didn't occur to her that I was leaving. She couldn't imagine that I was willing to just walk away from everything. With a heavy heart and a tearing eyes and a congested nose, I went into the bedroom and started packing. After packing the essentials, I went to kiss my daughter goodbye as my wife looked on. I was so ashamed to look in her face, and I was mentally and emotionally exhausted. As I was dragging my luggage out the door, it dawned on her that I was actually leaving. It was then that she started apologizing, but it was too late. I never looked back. Unfortunately, that was the last time I saw my daughter for almost 2 years. I packed all my belongings on my bike and drove south till I found the cheapest hotel to crash. I couldn't take a bus down to Georgia because I wasn't going to abandon or sell my bike for a discount. So I rode the bike from New York to Georgia. When I arrived at my friend's house, I could finally breathe the fresh air of freedom, literally and figuratively. The air in New York was suffocating. My friend had a comfortable place. He was so happy to see me and told me that I could sleep on his couch as long as I wanted. It didn't take long for my wife to start blowing up my phone, leaving voice messages, asking where I was, apologizing, and asking me to come back home, just so she didn't think I was in trouble. I sent her a text message telling her that I don't want to see her ever again in my life. After 3 months of no response, she started using my family back home to mediate and to get me to return to New York, telling them that I abandoned my daughter. When it didn't work, she stopped contacting me. My friend was doing real estate back then, so he got me into it. I got my license and started selling wholesaling and flipping houses. 2 months after I left New York, I closed on my first property and found a lot of success in real estate. A year later, I fell in love with another realtor. Our relationship got to a point where we needed to take it to the next level, but I told her that I don't want to get married again. She knew my story, and we got along so well that she was fine with it. I'm not trying to brag, but I was making really good money flipping houses, 5 times what I would have made with an MBA degree. During Christmas, I want to take my girlfriend on vacation in New York so we could see my daughter and officially file for divorce from my estranged wife. When I got to New York, I called my estranged wife. I haven't spoken to her in more than a year. She was shocked to hear from me and couldn't wait to see me. I went to visit my soon-to-be ex-wife. She wasn't aware that I had a serious girlfriend. I was happy to see my daughter. They were still living in the same apartment. Sadly, my soon-to-be ex-wife thought I was coming back to her. I didn't feel anything when she started crying, realizing that I came to divorce her. It was never lost to me that not so long ago, she wanted me arrested and deported after I caught her cheating. I told her that I came to visit New York to see my daughter and finalize our divorce. I didn't tell her anything about my girlfriend because I don't want anything to interfere with the custody arrangements of my daughter. As for right now, I'm just going to enjoy my stay in New York with my daughter before heading back to Georgia with my girlfriend. I hope that after the divorce is finalized, my daughter would visit me in Georgia more often. Thank you for making it to the end of this story. Please share your opinion on the comment section and don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you and have